Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode 45 of the Office Hours podcast. In this episode, we talk a bit about what it is being a senior and my thoughts on that subject, what it entails, what kind of things a senior should be doing or should not be doing. We also talked a little bit about my approaches to refactoring of various code projects. And lastly, we talked a lot about how your language of choice impacts your application and your thinking and what are the things that you should be considering. I really hope that you're going to enjoy what's about to follow, and let's get on with it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode 45 of the Office Hours podcast. It's been a quick second since we had a chance to record with Mo, but here it is. He's back. So, hey Mo, how you been?
I've been good, Vasily. You miss me?
I missed, yeah,
Do
of
you miss?
course, of course.
No, say it like you mean it,
I
Vasily.
did.
Did you?
I did miss you very much. We haven't had a chance to chat in several weeks, it seems, because it's
Yeah,
summer. Everyone's busy. It's really hot. I don't know how it is over where you are, but it's really hot here. We're going through a heat wave. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
it's crazy. We're going camping next week, and I looked at the weather forecast for the place we're going to, and it's going to be like above 32 or some stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting, but it's on a lake, so there's that. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, we're doing it every year, so we'll manage. It's not the first time.
Yeah, but I think like it gets a bit more intense if you have like heat wave on a lake. Like the water becomes hot. I mean, maybe I don't know. But anyway, it should be fun. You should enjoy yourself anyway. For us here, we have like 20 degrees, so
Ah, that's
it's not
very,
even.
very pleasant.
Yeah, but it's been raining like since yesterday,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
it's quite humid outside. But anyway, we're doing well. To be honest, I've missed you too, Vasily. Like it feels like we haven't had a chance to talk, like you said. And I have like things that I kept to discuss with you. Like first one, you know how like sometimes I go through like social media to find um some inspirational stuffs. These days, I do like LinkedIn. I find like I feel maybe I'm getting too old for Twitter now, or maybe I just don't know how to use it anymore. But now I am hanging out on LinkedIn, and then I saw this post on LinkedIn. This guy posted something about senior software engineers. He said one time he was asking his manager why I mean about becoming a senior software engineer, and the manager said like to be a senior software engineer is not about you sitting alone and solving your own problem. It's more about like working with other people to solve other problems. But then when I read this post, I had a few I felt a little bit somehow about it because I feel like one time we were talking about visibility and like all these kind of things and like how people have different personalities in like in the different teams. And then I feel this in itself is probably one big issue in our industry. Like people that talk a lot seem to have the pers perspective. Is that a word?
It
Or
is
perceptive? Perspective? Anyway.
perception.
Perception, yeah. Like they know what they're doing and they know what they're saying, but it's not always the case. And maybe it's not the same thing because he said solving other people's problems. And I don't even understand it. Why do you have to solve other people's problems to be considered senior?
Wow, a great
I don't
question.
know
Huh.
if I really get this post. This post bothered me for like a few days.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I can we can talk about the way that I see it. I don't know if it meant other people's problems. It probably meant like you need to be able to solve your team's problems. And I think if you were to ask me this a bunch of years back, I would say solving team's problems is if somebody's like stuck on some technical problem, then that's a problem that you as a senior can solve, and you can solve that problem. But now, upon some reflection, I feel like the problem is not the problem. The problem is like inability of other people to solve that problem. So if you can help them
Mm,
overcome that, then you're a force multiplier, because under your guidance the entire team grows. Like each individual contributor on the team becomes better, and as a result, like the overall output gets better or faster, or you get to do more things, right?
mm,
So for a long time I've been kind of stuck in this trap of, if somebody has a problem on a team that I have to solve it, or I would frame it as helping them solve it, but in reality, it was likely more about me solving them and showing them how I do it, which is, it's helpful, but not to the same extent as them going through it and solving it themselves. And I guess the paradox is like, if they were able to solve it themselves, then they wouldn't need you in that particular instance. So there needs to be a balance between how much
mhm.
it kind of, it's this thing where I can come in its absolute, I'd come in and just like yank the person's keyboard and just like bang it out, and there, solved, and then away, and I'm gone, which is not really going to work out too well. I mean, it solves the problem, but it doesn't solve the problem of them being stuck in the first place, of like not having enough skill or expertise or context. A lot of cases too, it can be context, right? Like, as a senior, you should possess more context about the work that you're doing as a team, like how that particular puzzle piece fits in with the rest of the organization. So junior developers usually lack that. And so when they get stuck on something, they might not have enough context to make critical decisions, because they just don't know literally where, in which direction it's supposed to be going, right? I was actually listening to another podcast this morning, and a guy was saying, like, the degree to which you can be vague in your direction determines how professional the people on your team are. Like, if you have to spell everything out for them to be able to execute, they're not very professional. They're just like following instructions verbatim. But if you kind of throw in something on a level like, I have this idea, I think that we should, I don't know, like use this library to solve it, and then they like got it, and then they go out and implement it and solve it, that's a high degree of autonomy, right? And so I think as a senior, you would be somewhere close to the other extreme of, you don't need that much. They give you a few breadcrumbs of what needs to happen, and you can already come up with the design and solution and implement it. And if you're like more on the
Yeah.
junior side, you need like specific point by point instructions on what to do. And any kind of spot where you get stuck is, it's like, okay, now I don't know what to do. I need to call for someone's help. And so as a senior, solving other people's problems means getting them from following instructions to being able to, implement on their own.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I feel like this explains a bit more, but I don't feel like, so for example, I think for me, in my own view, I don't really have a lot of like junior developers around me that much. So like in my own view, I see a lot of more like, um, you know, intermediate senior people who can actually like solve their own problems.
Right.
I think what I would call solving other people's problem is not like, oh yeah, you got stuck at implementing a function, or like maybe you got stuck. This is not
Mm-hmm.
my own definition of problem right now. I
Okay.
feel like, so for me, problem might be like, mm, say we want to implement a particular feature, and maybe to implement this feature, you need to do a certain refactor or something like this,
Mm-hmm.
like, but if I want to show, if you want to show a manager or someone like, oh yeah, like you you want to show yourself to the team, I feel like this is probably like going to be too much workload for you, even you. If the problem we're solving is just like, yeah, somebody was trying to implement a particular function or like use a particular stuff like this. I feel like that probably might be easy to do, that might make you
Well,
helpful to your team,
but
but
like again,
but in
again,
the
solving
grand
a
scheme of things.
yeah, solving a problem versus solving the problem in that particular context, right? Like, okay, so let's reframe it because in your context, you don't have a bunch of people who would come to you with things when they're stuck. So like,
Not really.
what does solving other people's problems means? I think there's this other spectrum of how much you want to take ownership and get involved with things. So you mentioned the example of, oh, in order to like, we can implement this feature, but if we did this refactoring, it would be better, right? It would
Mhm.
be easier and it would save us some grief later on down the line, right? And I can tell you that like most junior and even intermediate developers, they're never going out of their way to go through the code base and look like through it, try to visualize it holistically and see the really crappy parts and think about how to refactor them. You kind of arrive at that stage where some things start to bother you so much that it's like, okay, well, this is really nasty. Like we have to do something about it. The problem is that you don't always get that. You don't always get the resources to actually do it. which is that little soul destroying piece of like just seeing stuff around you that you don't like aesthetically and not being able to do anything about it, or like resorting to like some ninja refactorings. Yeah, but the problem with ninja refactorings is like they can only be very tiny because
Yeah.
some huge rewrite. First of all, if you do it in secret, people might not appreciate that because it's gonna wreck everyone's day. But just the whole idea of keeping it like trying to keep it better than you found it, that's usually comes with like ascending to a senior level. Most other people, they kind of either are too afraid to touch it, or they don't know enough about it to touch it, or they simply don't care. They would come in, they would do some quick fix, some kludge to make sure that the feature they're working on is working right now, and the rest be damned.
The
um,
recipe.
yeah, so it's I think it's an attitude thing, right? And so solving other people's problems in this case, it's like what opportunities we have for improvement in our code base overall that will make things better for us later on. Because, if you never take good care of it, eventually it reaches a stage where making changes to it just becomes really, really difficult. And yeah, you kind of have to be proactive. Uh, I don't know where I was going with this, but I think I kind of arrived.
But I think I get what you're saying. I think it makes more. I feel a bit better about it. I think the word problem, solving other people's problem, there is more of a, it's a figure of speech, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not literally like going to. I feel it's just being more helpful to your team members, and also like you're explaining now, maybe to have more um vision
Mm.
about
Yeah,
even finding what is problem in fact in
yeah,
the first
yeah.
place,
Because,
to
yeah,
understand
a lot of times
context.
people don't see things you see as problems. They just like, oh yeah, it's just some crappy code, but it like whatever. But then you can see further into the future to realize that it's like it's brewing and it's gonna blow up one day,
Yeah.
and they might not see it that way, and they might not see it that way maybe because you're either wrong or they just don't have enough context or experience to understand what might happen. So there's that thing, and I think the other part of it, or rather the other aspect is I can tell you with 100% certainty, like the desire to just tell everyone go away. I'm just lone wolfing it around here. I'm just working on this feature, and I'm just gonna crawl out of my cave and present it when it's done. It's really overwhelming because it's a really easy thing to do. You just ignore it, like la 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 la. I'm coding. I'm coding. I'm coding. Go away,
Yep.
right? So, but I think that sometimes it may be necessary. Like I
Mhm.
do that every once in a while where there's something major or something critical where it's like, okay, you know what? D&D, turn off notifications, turn off everything, and just get it done.
Mhm.
But it's not the primary mode of operation because uh, you can you can run out of like big and cool things to work on pretty fast. And if you're just going to be lone wolfing some random React components that like anyone can really build, you're kind of wasting your efforts on trivial shit.
You know, up until I feel maybe a few years ago, you know what? I feel when I was in like during college, like school and like learning stuff in school, I
Mm-hmm.
used to feel like being a part of the motivation of getting into this industry was because I felt like I was just gonna be able to be by myself and do things on my own, like, it's you and your computer against the world. But I've noticed that when you work in a team, it's always like, yeah, you have to talk to people, you have to um, share knowledge, you have to adapt to the team or stuff like this. So I feel like there's probably a bit more interaction involved. And this is something that, like when you mentioned like the the desire to just work on your own and do stuff on your own, that made me think about this because like I think if I'm going by my personality, actually, I would prefer to just take on the issue, just go figure it out, and then come back. And if I go by my personality, but I've soon learned that yeah, you have to really communicate. Sometimes you don't even think it's important to say that much, but like it's part of the job in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I don't know. How did you cope with stuff like this? Because I think this must have been something that you had to work on too,
Yeah.
no?
I think that big caveat to what I'm saying is I'm saying it from a perspective of my own personality. So it might not
Yeah.
work exactly the same for everybody, right? Because I guess I seek out that type of communication because I like to share my knowledge with people. And not because I just want to
Hmm.
impress them, because I don't know, that gets old really quick. But sometimes things bug me. It's like,
Hmm.
if learn the damn shortcuts. They make your life so much better. So when I see a person like pressing backspace 25 times on a line, I was just like, it's just like,
I mean, yeah, fair enough. You
and
could
it
go
goes
ahead.
it goes it goes into more things too, and because in order for people to reach that level like of independence, they have to have a systematic approach. And I'm just riffing right now because this is just something that I'm kind of seriously thinking about right this instant. So it could be all sorts of
No,
weird.
go
But
on.
like there needs to be a systematic approach for problem solving because, it is engineering after all, but then what do I know? Uh, and
Yeah.
there is a systematic approach in
Hmm.
engineering and troubleshooting, understanding why the things are like, why the things are happening the way they are happening, like the ability to debug, ability to use tools. And I think the framework for it can be taught. Like the specifics are probably really hard to teach because like I don't know. Today we've encountered some issue where we have some code gen tool that ingests some YAML file and is supposed to spit out like TypeScript client code and types for some API. And it doesn't work, it just hangs. And I haven't had a chance to look at it myself, but I immediately know what things I would have attempted to do to see what is happening there that are informed by my years of experience and having to dish out those same tools in previous instances where I needed to debug something in a very limited environment. And so you can have a checkbox. It's like you have to be able to live off the land and use the tools that are available for you at the target system to identify the issues. But I can't give them the universal recipe for what tools to use at what particular time. Like you still have to have experience to leverage to get a good judgment of what's there. But the problem is not not knowing what tool to use. The problem is when people don't realize that there are tools that they could use and they just give up. So like that part is more of a thing that you need to be able to solve for other people, is giving them the understanding of what is possible in the pursuit of their goals. It's like just expanding the domain of options that they can choose from, because up to recently, it inevitably ended up in a situation where the palette of options to choose from was try to Google it, and if you don't find anything, then ask Vasily for help, which is not, it's not necessarily the place they want to be, and it's not the place where I want to be, right? The palette should be much broader than that, and after they've exhausted everything and nothing helped, like final resort, that would be me. And right now, I guess in the last couple of months, I've been reevaluating my approach in how I even do this. So I still haven't figured it out, but there's definitely some qualitative shift that is happening in my approach right now. So it'd be interesting to see how it plays out in the end.
Yeah, I mean, if I was on your team, I'll probably want to use the Vasily should know it's card anyway. I probably want to use the same card too because,
But
Vasily.
if you played any of those card battler games, those cards have a cooldown. You can't just spam the card. It eventually
If it's there, I will
the
spam
charges,
it.
the charges, they dissipate, and you have to wait until that card is available again.
I mean, like I said, if it's there, I will spam it. Like until Vasily says no.
Right.
Well, then now. But if Vasily says
Yes.
yes,
So
you
so
know.
so here's my dilemma. I should be saying no, but the product also needs to move forward. So I have to be very judicious in my
See,
use of no and
of no.
answers.
See,
That's the
so
hard
yeah,
part.
lucky your team is lucky to have you because I mean it's better than Google. Vasily is just one Slack away and
Okay, don't give them any ideas, Mo. They watching this, so
it's better than Google. So anyway, yeah, Vasily. I mean, hopefully, let me know how it works.
yeah.
But earlier we were talking about something that I wanted to ask you too.
Mm.
Um, I mean, like a while ago, we were talking about one of your projects, like it was a big refactoring project. I think that was one back when you were working like in Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to ask you, like, what's your approach to refactoring? Like when you want to do like big refactors, um, what's your usual approach to this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think no two situations are the same, and you have to have an understanding of what was the intent. Because usually what necessitates refactoring is when some area of the code has been developed once and it worked really well, and then through some incremental accumulation of additional features, that original intent does no longer hold in terms of like its architecture, because people just add these quick ways of getting stuff done for what they need right now without like looking at the big picture, right? So it kind of overgrows with all of this crap. And there's like several traps in there. There's one trap at the original design stage. You try to anticipate how that thing might go in the future, and you try to anticipate and you try to have these like leave people some escape hatches, like, oh, if they needed to add this functionality, I'm going to leave them this function that they can integrate with and things like that. The problem is like it takes a lot of effort. You can't anticipate everything. You write a bunch of code, and the likelihood is no one is even gonna be making changes into place. So all of that work was basically for nothing, and you just over-engineer the heck out of it. For its current form that it needs to do is way too over-engineered, so people are like very cautious about approaching it in the first place. So for that, the refactoring should be preventative. Just like don't put all that crap in there until you actually need it. And then iteratively, after you've put in stuff there that you needed it, you have to kind of take a big picture look at it and understand what was the original intent and what the intent is now and how you would redo it. And sometimes some refactorings are possible and easy, and sometimes they're possible, but they're very hard, and you just kind of have to understand if it's worth it or not. But like one of the worst things that you can do is like the lava flow, where you have a you have a half-assed refactoring that you abandon halfway through and don't fully complete, and then you have like a layer that like the base layer of the architecture, then you have another layer on top, which is like your half-assed refactoring that doesn't cover the entire base layer, and then there's going to be another layer on top with some other half-assed refactoring, and now there's like 4 different ways that you can do things, which is
Mm.
supposed to be one, right? And now when new people come in,
Mhm. Mhm.
depending on which file they happen to open, they're going to replicate that because, tiny features are usually given off to juniors. And since juniors don't know that much, they just look for something similar and they copy paste. And so if you have 4 new people on a team and they happen to pick 4 different files that they get their inspiration from, all those 4 patterns start slowly proliferating again. So if you're not sure that you can actually complete your refactoring to 100%, don't start because it'll bring more problems in the future. And, sometimes it's just like, you know what, like let the sleeping dogs lie and put enough warnings around some place to like not touch it or something like that. It's kind of very case by case basis. So I think the refactoring that in Ruby, that was a couple of years ago, and effectively there was this query that would get a bunch of data from a database, and then it would iterate on a record by record basis and accumulate the data. And as it was iterating, it would issue other queries. And so effectively it just turned into this massive query fest where, like, if we're processing 10,000 users, we're going to run one query to get the 10,000. And then for each user, it's going to run like 25 more queries for each user individually. And so now you're like blown out, your queries are running left and right. And my solution to that was try to understand all of the data that you need ahead of time, load it in like 5 or 6 different queries, and then just process everything. And so, but the problem is that that business logic itself was very, 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 very complicated. And it was really hard to debug. And so my method of debugging it was basically take the snapshot of the input and output from like your current code, and then take the snapshot of the output from the refactored code and compare them, and ideally they should match. And I could never get them to match fully, but I could get it to run in like 15 minutes instead of 10 hours, and I was getting really close. And then I left that company.
Oh, you didn't get to the end line. Anyway,
Yeah.
I wanted I want to ask you about the snapshot. Like, do you mean literal snapshot or like um
Well, like
integration tests?
a JSON dump or a CSV file that I literally would just diff to see, like, is everything exactly, is the output produced exactly the same? It's kind of like a black box approach. Like, given input X, we expect output Y. If the refactored version does not produce output Y verbatim, then it's clearly doing something wrong. And you just work around that, trying to get it to a state where it would do the right thing. It's not always the right tool. It's sometimes the tool. And that's the thing, right? Like I can't give exact solution to this problem. It's just like you have to have your palette of tools that you can
Hmm.
leverage big enough so that you can find something in there for any particular case.
Yeah. I mean, these days I've been doing quite a handful of refactor work, and I feel like you said, it depends on the cases, but I learned to value more of like more tests in a way, because like it's fun, but at the same time there is a very high chance of like you don't want to change too. purpose of refactor is to make the changes such that in a way that the behavior actually does not change.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the actual behavior of the feature or like the UI or whatever, like does not change. But I find I find it interesting, like I've come to really appreciate documentation in a way. And I used to wonder like, do people actually put in this amount of effort into like documenting for this type of purpose? And why not? Because why not? Because like in my like I feel like in some companies they have like technical writers, and I wonder like
Well, if you have a dedicated resource for that, then obviously you should leverage it and create documentation. But like in the hierarchy of list of things we can afford to do, it's like product, tests, integration tests, like automated tests. Documentation is like somewhere way down there. Like you're lucky if you get to integration tests with the amount of time and budget that you have to do your stuff. Everybody would like to have documentation that is up to date and accurate. It's just it's really expensive to do so because not only you have to write it once, you have to keep it up to date. And keeping up to date is the hard part. Like that's the part that takes most of the effort. It's like 10% to write it and then 90% to actually keep it up to date when stuff changes, and stuff changes all the time, right? So it's just impossible. Like we have a like a document management thing similar to like Notion or whatever, slightly different but like similar. And I wrote this little API thing which would like scrape it and create a list of all the pages and when they were last updated, and then just sort them in like the least recently updated. And there's like some pages in there that are like a year old for something. Then some of them, fair enough. Maybe it's a project that is no longer being active, so there's no need to write anything. But there's like, here's the thing that we're currently working on, and that page was updated 30 days ago. Like a lot could have changed in 30 days. So is the stuff on that page, is it even still valid? And which
yeah,
part of it is valid? Which part of it isn't invalid? You actually have to go through and confirm that all of the claims on that page actually are correct. And that is just such a gargantuan effort that like ain't nobody got time for that, as the meme
yeah.
goes.
But I have a when I mention technical writers, I feel maybe I should spell out what I was trying to say. Like, for example, I mean, we have writers who take care of like, maybe to talk about the feature at the end of the day. But when it comes to like documentation in terms of, let's say you have a API and you want to, I mean, you can make this automated. Like I think you could use Swagger for this. I mean, it's not even total. I mean, some form of documentation in a way, like for example, if you pick up a public API
Mm-hmm.
like a random API, like at least you
Yeah.
can read some things to know like, oh yeah, these are things. But sometimes I wonder, is it the job? Should it be the responsibility of the writers to do this, or should it be the developer's responsibility?
I think that if you can derive as much of it as possible from the code itself, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. And actually, one thing that I was going to mention when it comes to refactoring, the thing that really helps is, well, first of all, you should be writing in a typed language. I know that that's probably going to ruffle some feathers around here, but you should write in a typed language because you should pick a language where types can actually describe your business logic to an extent. And I think that uh, the 3.5 people who use F# are probably going to be very happy right now, but F# is great for that. You can capture your business logic on a type level. As the saying goes, make error states unexpressed. Like you cannot express error states through the type system. Like if the compiler compiled it, then it is correct, at least to a certain degree. We're not going to go into like formal verification or anything like that, but it's like the best effort. And one of the examples that I always like to use because it's very easily understandable. It's like if you have a person entity in your system and that person has an email address, and that email address can be either unverified email address or a verified email address. And in your code, the constructor for the verified email address is private. You cannot get an instance of that object unless you call verify email flow. And once that's done, you get your verified email instance. And so all of the code that needs to use email in a critical fashion has to use the verified email. And the only way they can get it is if that email went through verification. So you just eliminate a whole bunch of issues from business logic perspective on a level where a compiler can say, cannot use unverified email here, go away, come back with a good thing. You can do that. The other thing is, I don't think too many people are going to be building stuff in F# because it's quite a quirky language with an interesting syntax. It's basically Microsoft's functional programming language for the .NET runtime.
No, I'm bullying. It's just like, it's F#, like, it's F#.
Right.
If
you want to expand your horizons, look into F# because it's definitely out there.
So you're recommending it?
For certain cases. I think that if you're going to build a business logic core of some enterprise app, like if you're running on .NET Stack, first of all, then, and if you need to write the logic in a very pure fashion, in a very like a compute fashion, F# is probably going to be a great choice. But, for us as web developers, we have TypeScript, and people kind of hate on TypeScript a lot of times because it just gives me errors all the time. I can't do stuff that I want. But again, it has a very expressive type system. You can encode states in a way that you have to be very specific about what you want and what you're getting. And the third part of that equation is if you do contracts on all of your application boundaries, meaning if you are reading from an API, do not just say const response : my response type equals result response.json, right? Where you just say, yeah, it's that type. It's like, don't do that. Use a contract to verify that the data you're getting is in fact matches to that type. And that thing will actually give you the strong type of it. And if it doesn't match, you'll fail and you get an error. And you can do the same thing even with egress. So you can generate the contracts from some external Swagger, and you can generate types from those contracts or from the Swagger, whichever. So you protect your ingress of data, and you can do the same thing for egress. You can generate your Swagger based off of contracts or types or something like that. And then within your application, if you put the sentries on all exits and entries internally, you're safe. Mm-hmm. And if you're leveraging the types correctly, you're safe. And refactoring becomes easier because as soon as you change the shape of something, the compiler immediately cascades it through everywhere where it's no longer correct. Mm-hmm. And you just fix that. And then you're done, right?
You see, this is one of the reasons why I said if I work on your team, I feel like I would probably use the Vasily card as well, because look at this. I didn't even need to go on Google to learn all this new stuff. I could just ask Vasily. So I feel they're lucky, but yeah. I didn't know much about F# before now. I feel like it was just one of those new stuff that, you just like make jokes of. But it seems to be...
Those 3.5 developers are very angry with you right now.
I felt like it was just one of those languages, like you just like make fun of it.
Yeah.
And
it's like Haskell mentioned, by the way.
In that category, but...
Well, here's the thing, too, is you don't necessarily have to write your applications in Haskell or F#. But if you are aware of the kinds of things that you can do with those languages, it will inform you, and you will think about it, and you will say to yourself, I wonder if I can replicate at least portions of that in my language to get the benefits that those guys are getting without dragging in the whole thing in the kitchen sink, right? Because sometimes it might not be possible, but like you really want some form of verification through your type system. And if you're using TypeScript, it's very flexible. You can do a lot of crazy things with it, but just don't go too crazy.
You know, I have two things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
First is like TypeScript is good, but it also has like some weaknesses too. Like you have, especially when it comes to typing in TypeScript. I think now, I think in the latest versions of TypeScript, there are some ways to work around actually typing. Or like you said, like the contrasts and stuff. Like there are actually some. So for example, I think in some cases you can use like unknowns
Yeah.
or like, and you you allow to figure out like what the type would be later on, or like, some cases you can just slap any somewhere, but
Be gone, demon. Be gone.
but let's not even mention that because this is big. But I
Yeah,
think
don't use any kids.
it could be, it could be the idea itself is very good. And to be honest, I feel like for the most part of the time that I've actually worked in a JavaScript environment, I've used TypeScript more, so I would say I appreciate it. I actually
Yeah.
appreciate TypeScript.
There.
But
Yeah.
I don't think it's like you cannot put it in the category of like Java, like, like actually language with real structure and stuff like this.
Well, Java's type
But
system is not as expressive as TypeScript's type system. Let's start with that. Like, you can't do a bunch of things in Java that you can do in TypeScript, right? So, like, I don't think that Java really is a straightforward comparison here. And I think that
not really.
there's a thing with TypeScript. TypeScript imposes a certain way of thinking and writing your code that is not JavaScript. Even though it operates on top of JavaScript, the way the JavaScript developers are very kind of familiar with, some of them don't work in TypeScript. It does not make sense in TypeScript's world, even though it's the same runtime underneath. So you have to structure your code originally in the manner that TypeScript kind of nudges you towards. And if you do that, it may be looking a little bit differently, but it actually is better. And if you don't, I think that like if you don't see the point of TypeScript, which again, when I first encountered TypeScript, it was like, what the heck is this? Like, who needs that? It literally gives nothing to me. It was because I did not really get it. So if you feel like TypeScript is like, yeah, TypeScript is kind of cool, I guess we can say that this is a string and this is a number, and that's kind of nice, I guess. You probably haven't leveraged it in a way where you really start cooking with gas once you have it throughout your system. And the other thing too is it's very hard to bring TypeScript into a JavaScript project if it had none to begin with. For some projects, it may not make sense. Like you can watch, what's this guy's name? The guy, I think he's the guy who's doing Svelte. They basically said that they're ditching TypeScript for their internals entirely, and they're building their core in JavaScript because TypeScript is actually preventing them from doing the things that they want. So there's obviously that part. However, because they expose all the JS docs and all the types through JS docs, they still provide like a TypeScript interface to the consumer. So the consumer really shouldn't care about how the internals are implemented, but that's besides the point. Rich Hickey, I guess. Is it Rich Hickey? I don't remember. Sorry if I used the wrong name there. What was I gonna say? Yes. If you start a brand new project in TypeScript and you kind of work within those constraints and you express types properly and you don't use any, and like you use unknown sparingly where it makes sense, and you use like type assertions or use contracts to figure it out, you're going to be in a much different world compared to if you were doing that project in JavaScript. I think in JavaScript, it makes it easy. If you just start, you can get something without having to think about all that stuff. But here's the point. By having to think about the types, you spend more time internally planning without just immediately running and start typing code. And this is something that we talked about privately, is that
Yeah.
do not just
Yeah.
go and start writing code in the first 5 minutes. Like, take a sit down and think about what you're going to build. And TypeScript, in a way, forces you to do that, because you have to actually think about, it's like, okay, well, what are the entities I have in my system? I can, preemptively start writing out some types for that. Like, how are they going to travel through the data pipelines? The other thing, I guess, if we're on concrete advice, is that people like to use the same types for ingress and egress because they're very, very similar a lot of times, but they're not always that. So it's best to keep them separate and do conversions between them. It'll save you a lot of grief because, just trust me.
Of course.
or not. It's up to you. But I guess what I'm saying is once you actually hit the point where it really makes your life that much better, I think at that point you'd be like, yeah, I'm not going back to raw JavaScript anymore. It's not worth it. And I have reached that point some years back. And at first, before I started using TypeScript, I was exposed to TypeScript and I did not get it. And I didn't feel like the compiler and all that stuff on top of it is necessary. I was pretty comfortable with my JavaScript. And after being effectively forced into it by having to work in it for an Angular project, I got a chance to learn it, understand it better, learn advanced techniques with it, and now it's number one tool in my arsenal for web dev. It's just like...
Of course, another win for Angular, because in Angular you have to do. But the thing is, like,
Well, I don't use Angular
over
anymore, but it was the gateway drug
of course,
into
thing
TypeScript.
is, when you go through Angular will actually leave a mark on you for sure. And I'm not even promoting Angular here, but I was gonna say I agree with you. I think TypeScript is it gives you a form of um structure
Yeah.
in your code.
You know how they see freedom is discipline? And TypeScript require like
honestly,
you don't have to, but if you want to, you can turn on all the strict mode checks and have it force the discipline upon you, which will in the end make you more free than you were before.
I agree with like the idea of TypeScript. The reason why I was um trying to poke was just because I mean I've tried a few other languages. I mean, to be fair, I would say in web. Anyway, I would say like I just don't see it like that. Maybe because I have not really like suffered JavaScript a lot, like I, the raw JavaScript, like I used it not for like directly, not too long. Like I just went straight into TypeScript. You understand? Like so for me, I didn't do a lot of
Yeah,
suffering.
you didn't get the trauma of dealing with raw JavaScript. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think maybe this is why I'm feeling like, it's just TypeScript. You know how like how do you say it? Like you born with silver spoon, and then you just like, yeah, that's just life.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just life. So I feel like this is how I feel.
Isn't it like this for everyone? It's like, no.
Yeah, this is probably how I feel about it, but I get the point, I get the idea. Hopefully more people get it. I don't think people will still argue nowadays. I think the argument is almost
No.
settled.
People will
Be-
argue over anything, literally.
I mean, the reason why I said this is because I think even React, if I'm not wrong, I think React now moved to TypeScript too, no?
Internally, I
No?
mean, they have been giving you bindings for all of their stuff, so everything is typed if you're using it in TypeScript. Is the core of React TypeScript? Maybe, I think it may be. I don't know.
I think now, if I'm not wrong, I think now it is. Like, I think there was a time where it was just JavaScript, like raw JavaScript. And then now, if I'm not, honestly, I might be wrong here. Like,
Well, I mean, it's easy to
yeah,
check. You just go to GitHub and open their source code. I think it it,
yeah,
it
but
might be in TypeScript too.
yeah, now
Maybe
it's
not.
in, so like, I feel this kind of ended debate at some point because, like, so if you use raw JavaScript now, like, what's your reason?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why? Like, why? What are you arguing about? I guess, like, some people even people who work with, like, Node.js at the time, At the time, like Node.js was also like raw JavaScript. And recently, I think now they have support for TypeScript for
Mm,
development.
not natively. I mean, you still have to run through the compiler, but here's where projects like Bun and what's that other one come along, where you actually can just tell it to run TypeScript and it does the transpilation internally. I don't think it does
Yeah, I
the
don't
type
know.
checking, so you could still leverage like the TypeScript language server that defers to the compiler to get all of your errors. But in terms of running it, it just does like super fast, strip all of the TypeScript stuff out of it and do some minor transforms on the things that require it, like enums. And you can basically run TypeScript at no upfront cost. So Bun is really cool. I wish I had more opportunities to use Bun.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I feel like the big points for raw JavaScript, it's actually like the data it's going. So I don't know if people still like what would be your argument now? You want to do
For
what?
using raw JavaScript?
What exactly can be your actual argument you want to
Well,
do?
see, here's the thing, right? So, like, if you take the Svelte guy, still feel really bad that I don't remember his name, but because they have JS and they express types through JS and TypeScript language server is smart enough to just use those types as if they were TypeScript types, they're not 100% compatible in terms of their expressivity, but they're good enough to get you full autocomplete for everything you might want to do. So any library consumer can use it in a TypeScript environment and get types to their heart's content, but internally it doesn't use those because they probably don't deal with the types of problems that arise from data mismatch or something. They deal with like DOM and rendering and very kind of low level guts where just having all of that overhead probably doesn't really give them that much. But they're not building a business application. They're building a library, like a low
No,
level library, right? But if you're
yeah,
building
yeah.
business application where it's all about entities and flows and data transformations, it's just so helpful to have that you could do it without it, but like sure, I guess.
Now I'm thinking about it. I feel like maybe they might, you know what? I feel like I might be wrong with like saying like the points because I'm just looking at it from like just
Yeah,
web. But I think
yeah,
I think JavaScript goes a bit like deeper than web
yeah.
a little bit. But
Yeah, it does.
either ways,
I,
what?
I think the problem for server side is that a lot of frameworks that people use, because they're written for performance, they don't fit too well on a TypeScript mental model in terms of how the objects are organized and how you access certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of them, because they were like, for instance, Express, JavaScript native, the
Yeah.
TypeScript types are added on top of it. And the concept of middleware doesn't really work too well in TypeScript because you're not able to reason about the state of the world unless you do all of the type plumbing through all of your middlewares manually to arrive at that final request response pair shape of all of the custom stuff that you're doing in
Mm-hmm.
there. And if your middleware is conditional, you cannot really express that on a type level that like, oh, if at this stage the person is of a certain class, then those properties are not going to be available to you, or it's very, very difficult to do. So it doesn't really quite works out too nicely. And there's a couple of like TypeScript native frameworks, but even they kind of are suffering from the middleware problem where it makes your internals really vague and depending on all these other factors. Because TypeScript is about like hard reasoning, about like this is the kind of data that I get and I know it for a fact because the compiler went through the lengths of ensuring it. And in that
Mm-hmm.
model that the server side JavaScript is doing, I don't think it's possible in a way that is performant and has great developer UX. And so we just kind of living in this hybrid world of like, we have types for convenience, but we don't have the guarantees. And it's kind of, yeah, and it's better than nothing, but it's not ideal. I would put it that way. So on backend, people a lot of times they choose to just do JavaScript
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it just makes their life literally easier for
Yeah.
for those reasons.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking about now. That yeah, I think these people can say they can have reasons for it. But anyway,
Yeah.
thank you, Vasily. It's always nice chatting with you. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, indeed. It's been a while, so
Yeah.
see you next week. Yeah.
Next week I'll probably be away camping, so maybe a week after.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
then we can do it
But
sometime.
yeah, we'll figure something out. And for those people who cannot add me through my company Slack, you can watch the videos on this channel and get some of it that way. All right.
Ask Vasily. He
Yeah.
knows it, you know.
Hashtag. All right. For everyone who's still with us, thank you for sticking around. I hope you find this interesting, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, and have a great day. Bye bye.
Bye.